in the next part of my talk, in the penultimate part of my talk, some other select Ambedkar remarks made before and after. First, from a talk to trade union workers in 1943, I quote, "It has been recognized that the state cannot be held at bay by corporations that are anti-social in purpose." A later speech, Ambedkar likewise warned, I quote, "We must not lose sight of the fact that big business is trying to play a great part in the political life of this country. If moneyed people try to influence the elections by contributing to the election fund of any political party, what would be the result?" End quote. Now, I don't have to draw the personal implications of these remarks in the India we live in today, So that's 1943-44 on big business. From an intervention, my next quote, from an intervention in Parliament in February 1949 on the Hindu Code Bill, which Ambedkar and Nehru were trying to pilot at that stage through the Provisional Parliament. And many conservative members had opposed it and had quoted this Smriti, that Smriti, this ancient sage, that ancient philosopher. And after listening to all of them, Ambedkar said, I quote, "I once counted 137 Smritis. And I do not know why our ancient Brahmins were so occupied in writing Smritis and why they did not spend their time doing something else," unquote. Now the point here, it's a slightly sarcastic remark, but it has a very profound truth to any reformer. The point here is that the Democrat and the social reformer must appeal to reason and justice, not custom and tradition. And incidentally, Gandhi would have agreed. If you, after the Pune Pact, when Gandhi was in prison, he was visited in Pune. He was visited by countless learned men of the Hindu faith, quoting this Smriti or that Smriti, and Gandhi just said, I don't know what they say, but I can tell you, untouchability is bad. That's all. It doesn't apply. Reason and justice should tell us it is bad. But that's now my next quote. This is from after the Constitution, and after Ambedkar resigned from the cabinet and restarted his own party, the Scheduled Caste Federation, to fight the forthcoming general elections. This is a speech made, and appropriately since there are so many students here today, a speech made by Dr. Ambedkar to the students of DAV College, Ludhiana, in the Punjab, in October 1951, after he resigned from the cabinet. I quote, "For the past 20 or 30 years, we acclimatized ourselves to one single political party." Now the reference here is essentially from the 1920s when Mahatma Gandhi launches the non-cooperation movement. Really the major hegemonic dominant political party in India from 1920 to 1951 when Ambedkar is speaking is the Congress. So he says, "For the past 20 or 30 years, we acclimatized ourselves to one single political party. We have nearly forgotten the necessity and importance of opposition to the fair working of parliamentary democracy." We have nearly forgotten the necessity and importance of opposition to the fair working of parliamentary democracy. We are continuously told that opposition is an evil. And then Ambedkar continues, "One important thing in parliamentary democracy is that people should know the other side, if there are two sides to a question. Hence, a functional opposition is required. Opposition," says Ambedkar, "is the key to a free political life. For the government may suppress the facts, the government may have only one-sided propaganda." Now, just think how strikingly relevant these remarks are today. Ambedkar is warning of the dangers of almost a one-party state, what the political scientist Rajni Kothari called the Congress system of Indian democracy, which roughly existed from, I'd say, 1920 to 1967, when, the 67 elections had, of course, the Congress winning re-election in the center, but many state governments being formed by opposition parties, so much so that it was said you can travel from Delhi to Howrah without going through a single Congress-ruled state. Now, so today when we live in an era of creeping, maybe not so creeping, single-party hegemony of the BJP, I think these warnings are worth recognizing. My next quote of Ambedkar, and the last quote of Ambedkar's that I'm offering, and then I'll give you some concluding remarks of my own, is from that same talk of October 1951 to college students in the Punjab. I quote, "Parliamentary government means negation of hereditary rule. No person can claim to be a hereditary ruler," unquote. Now, this celebration of democracy, this affirmation of democracy as a repudiation of the hereditary principle in politics was a point, and governance, was a point Ambedkar made repeatedly from the 1920s. Therefore, as some of you may have been delighted when I quoted his remarks about personality cult and single-party hegemony, let me say that Ambedkar would have been equally opposed to political parties being family firms, to a single family claiming, to the hereditary principle. Let me be very blunt. The hereditary principle in the Congress party of today would have been absolutely repugnant to Ambedkar. And in the DMK, and in the Shiv Sena, and in the Akali Dal, and in the RJD, and the SP, and so on. So let's be clear about that. He was a proper Democrat, an anti-feudal Democrat. Okay, now, speaking of personality cults, Ambedkar would have, today we have, again, if you look at the Indian political system today, it's really a tragic Hobson's choice for us, voters and citizens. You either have political parties who are personality cults, not just the BJP. You think of Mamta in West Bengal or Vijayan in Kerala. It's quite not, as they say about Vijayan, is Modi in a mundu. Now, or you have parties that are family firms. Now, Ambedkar would have been opposed to both. Speaking of personality cults, Ambedkar may not have been surprised by the extension of this Indian love for hero worship, uncritical hero worship, to spheres other than politics, with successful cricketers, film stars, and businessmen also elevated to godlike status. But perhaps he would not have been surprised by that, because he was seen it as intrinsic to Indian character, to democracy being merely a top dressing on Indian soil. But I believe, as a student and admirer of Ambedkar, that Ambedkar might have been embarrassed about the sometimes excessively worshipful adoration he has been subjected to by his own followers today. All right, now, my lecture so far has followed the lines of the title of the lecture. What would Dr. Ambedkar have made of the Republic of India today, 75 years after the promulgation of the Constitution, in whose drafting he played such a critical role? I've indicated the many areas in which his ideas continue to be of compelling relevance. However, as I conclude, I'd like to warn against taking Dr. Ambedkar as omniscient, as the first, second, and last word on the problems that plague our republic today. I'd like to warn against turning to him and his writings and his life, exemplary and remarkable and original and perceptive as all of that them might have been. I'd like to warn against turning to him as through his life or his ideas or his legacy, providing answers to all our problems with regard to democracy and social justice. There were some areas in which other contemporaries of his may have more to offer to us than Ambedkar today. I mean, Ambedkar can teach us a great deal, but there may be certain areas I think he will recognize that. All of us are focused because of our personal journeys, our intellectual and social and moral preoccupations on certain issues, and maybe pay less attention to others. So when it comes to safeguarding the rights of minorities, religious minorities, I think it's quite clear that Gandhi and Nehru are more relevant. In what order? In my own view about this, again, some years ago, some scholars in this audience may recognize that, may remember that there was a debate that posited by academics, political theorists, that posited Gandhian secularism versus Nehruvian secularism, and sort of suggested that Gandhian secularism was fine, but Nehruvian secularism may have been of foreign import. Actually, from the point, just as we needed Gandhi and Ambedkar both, maybe Ambedkar more than Gandhi, but also Gandhi, to delegitimize the pernicious practice of untouchability, which had to be delegitimized both by vigorous activity and opposition by the Dalits and by guilt-ridden upper castes, whom as Gandhi would have wanted to rid themselves of their superior complex. Likewise, if you look at secularism, actually and the protection of minority rights, the legacies of Gandhi and Nehru are complementary. Nehru emphasized that the state must not have a religious caste or religious orientation. You know, after Gandhi died, I mean, again, this is as a historian, I would like to remind the audience that, I mean, Gandhi's death, Gandhi was murdered by a right-wing Hindu fanatic. That is well known. What is not so well recognized is that 6 weeks after Gandhi's death, the Communist Party of India, under orders from their Russian masters, launched an armed insurrection against the Indian state. So the infant Indian state was pierced from left and right. And had Nehru and Patel not been together, this state, I could not have been speaking to you today. I mean, how Nehru and Patel, comrades and co-workers, have been made rivals and adversaries in the afterlife is a separate question. But I want to focus here only on what Nehru did at that time. The backdrop of partition, the ethnic cleansing of Hindus and Sikhs from the western Punjab, the ethnic cleansing of Muslims from the eastern Punjab. Millions of Muslims have decided to stay back in India and vote with their feet to be citizens of India. And the revenge and persecution coming not only from the Hindutva right, but even from conservative members of Nehru's own Congress party. And if you read his speeches, they're absolutely extraordinary. And if you read his letters to Chief Minister in 1947 and 1948, where he says, you know, whatever Pakistan does to its minorities, we must give our minorities equal citizenships and the rights that they deserve in a civilized state. And this continues, right? If you study his speeches in the first general election and what he's saying, he's fighting the first general election on the planks of equal rights for minorities and equal rights for women. Those are the two planks on what he's fighting for. Right. Now, equal rights for women he shared with Ambedkar totally. But on the question of, as a rights of minorities, Nehru was clear that the state must intervene to stop violence against minorities. Gandhi, on the other hand, worked in the level of civil society to build trust, reciprocity, understanding, between Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, but also Sikhs, Parsis, and so on. Hence his remarkable innovation of the interfaith prayer meeting. So when it comes to safeguarding the rights of minorities, Gandhi and Nehru may be more relevant, for they devoted their life and work to trying to make sure that India would not become a Hindu Pakistan. When it comes to gender equality, perhaps, particularly the workplace, perhaps early feminists like Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, on whom there's been a wonderful biography by Nico Slate, which I urge you to read, are more reliable guides. When it comes to the question of environmental sustainability, an issue which neither Ambedkar or Nehru recognized because of their commitment to large-scale industrialization, when it comes to the question of environmental sustainability, both Gandhi and Tagore were more prescient than Ambedkar or indeed than Nehru. When it comes to the vital role of civil society in acting as a check to the excesses of the market and the state, when it comes to this, the role of civil society, Kamala Devi and Gandhi may again be more instructive role models. The Congress-dominated nationalist narrative of the 1950s and 60s diminished the role and significance of Ambedkar in our political and moral history and elevated the role of people like Gandhi and Nehru, which is why growing up, as I did in a family of civil servants in northern India in the 1960s and 70s, they were the two people who are always talked about, and Ambedkar not at all. That Ambedkar's work and ideas are now better understood and more widely appreciated is very welcome indeed. It was two remarkable subaltern intellectuals of Karnataka, Devanur Mahadeva and D.R. Nagaraj, who first opened my own eyes and mind to the greatness of Dr. Ambedkar and the enduring relevance of his thought. In the decades since, I discovered Ambedkar through Mahadeva and Nagaraj in the 1990s in the state of Karnataka. In the decades since, as I have read more books about him and more writings and speeches by him, my admiration has steadily grown. Yet, in the year 2025, we should not make the reverse mistake of, shall we say, dumping Nehru and Gandhi and taking Ambedkar as our sole and only guide. In seeking to make this, our country, a republic more worthy of its founding ideals, we may need the guidance of some other remarkable figures apart from Ambedkar. Of course, we need Ambedkar too. In my own personal pantheon of moral and political exemplars, Ambedkar rests alongside four other visionary makers of modern India. These are Gandhi, Nehru, Tagore and Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, who, with Dr. Ambedkar, constitute a quintet to whom I return often for nourishment and inspiration. Let me end this lecture having made my case for a more plural, inclusive, shall we say, pantheon of moral and intellectual exemplars in which Ambedkar has a very important and honored place, but is not, subject to the kind of hero worship that he warned us against. But let me end this lecture largely about Ambedkar. So let me end with a last quote from Dr. Ambedkar himself. It is from an unpublished essay on Buddha and Marx, written in the year 1956, shortly before Dr. Ambedkar's conversion and then, of course, his tragic early death. And this is what the quote says, I read, quote, "Nothing is fallible. Nothing is binding together, forever. Nothing is fallible. Nothing is binding forever. Everything is subject to inquiry and examination." Thank you.